The Human Experience. Inside the Humanities at Stanford University. humanexperience.stanford.edu.
As you know, a pestilence of unprecedented ferocity started some time ago in the heathen lands of the Great Khan and the Golden Horde, and then, having grown in vigor in Turkey and Greece, spread over the whole Levant and Mesopotamia, and into Syria and Chaldea and Cyprus and all the Greek islands. Now, this terrible plague is spreading around the Mediterranean Sea, and is already starting to penetrate inland to strike many great cities in Italy and France. His voice grew tremulous, and he leaned towards John. In all of this time, the scourge has never weakened, nor ceased its movement northwards and westwards towards our land. Ordinary folk are gullible and delight in fancies and superstitions. So we, as intelligent and literate men, have become accustomed to dismiss most of the dreadful stories we have heard. I myself have done this. But we were wrong. Now even the most remarkable of these fantastical accounts are daily being confirmed as true by those who have seen these terrible things with their own eyes. All those who have fled in the wake of the plague have spoken with one voice. Nothing can stop its progress of destruction. Neither closing city gates against all outsiders, nor the breadth of the sea. This was the news that I want to impart urgently to priests like you, so that you might instruct your flock to call on God's mercy to avert this tragedy.
Well, unfortunately, it wasn't me reading that excerpt. The book was serialized by the BBC, and that was a well-known actor, and you'll discover from the way in which I deliver the rest of the lecture that I'm not up to that standard. Well, the scene there taken from the book is in the library of the great abbey of Bury St Edmunds, and it's between the librarian, the priest of a nearby village, which is the village I chose to base the book on, the village of Walsham, which is a few miles from Bury, and the infirmary of the abbey. That's the person who looked after the abbey infirmary. And the librarian is telling the priest about the remorseless progress of the plague across Europe. And the device I'm using there is to take the librarian, as and the abbey is known for the quality of its chronicles, who's a chronicler, a sober historian, a good judge of information, and then using contemporary sources to put words into his mouth as to what would have been known at the time. And I think that scene is set in early 1348, before the plague has actually reached England. The infirmary, who I have as a good friend of the priest, provides other means of getting across information from mid-14th century England on the state of medical knowledge, theories that were being put about on the nature of the disease and how it might be avoided. The book is unusual, and this is what I'll basically be talking about, because it combines fiction and history. And I'll start off saying a few words about the Black Death itself, which we can see from this map. Anything that's coloured there experienced the plague. The grey bits we haven't got information on, but my judgment is that actually the the plague just spread much further than we have record of it. It just disappears into Africa and India. Unlike most of these great watersheds and turning points in history, the most recent historical research is actually pushing the death rates higher than they used to be thought to be. And it now appears extremely unlikely that less than 40% of the population died. It's probably of the order of 50%, which, given the nature of plague, there's a great dispute about whether it was plague. I happen to believe that it was, although the disease was very different from the disease today. If it was plague, having 50%, 40% death rates means that the morbidity rate, that is the proportion of the population catching it, would be at figures like 70 to 75%. It must have looked to people who were experiencing it as if it was the end of the world and that nobody was going to survive. Well, literally scores of books have been written on the Black Death of the mid-14th century, and a sizable clutch of new volumes appears every year. Some are devoted to speculating on what the disease actually was, but the great majority trace the progress of the terrible pestilence on its tour of the known world, from its origins in the Asiatic steppes in the early 1340s to its demise in Russia in the early 1350s. Having studied and taught the Black Death for more than 30 years, I wanted to write something different, to find a new way of adding to our knowledge and understanding of this massively important but extremely well-worked historical event. I decided to write a history from the bottom upwards, a more direct and immediate history from within the ranks of the common people themselves, and even as far as possible from within their minds. I wanted to describe as far as possible what it was like to live and die during what has repeatedly been called the world's greatest natural disaster. A multitude of historians have written about the impact of the Black Death on society, but there's scarcely anything that takes the reader chronologically through the weeks and months of 1348, 49, and 50 in a single location. The dominating historiography of the Black Death is a broad description of the progression of the pestilence across the known world, and then an assessment of its long-term impact. Yet reconstructing the history of a single place can be very revealing and pose many significant new questions. In late 1348, what did villagers hear about the pestilence in England? And I should have pointed out that the village I based the book on is located about there. So what were the villagers in Walsham, in Suffolk, hearing about the plague? Where it was raging, how many it was killing, whether it was spreading. What did people feel, think, and experience? What were they told? What did they learn about the experiences of countries and regions while the pestilence raged? Well, here's another excerpt based on contemporary sources. It's a sea captain's speech in the book, which is actually based on a long letter sent from the papal court at Avignon while the plague was raging there.
I have heard terrible tales of human cruelty when the plague strikes. The sick are often treated like dogs by their families, who put food and drink next to their bed and then flee, leaving the poor creatures to die alone, uncared for and unconfessed. There are few doctors who will visit the sick for fear of certain infection, even if they are promised riches. Frightened priests also fail to perform their sacred duties, denying their parishioners the last rites, and so abandon their souls trembling on the edge of everlasting damnation.